Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie and welcome back to another video where I'm going to be talking about EVE: War for New Eden, the exciting new EVE Online board game being developed by Titanforge Games and up on Kickstarter right now. If you want to get involved in this, if you want to grab a copy of it and help back it, I'll put a link in the description down below. I forgot to do that in the other videos. What I wanted to do today was essentially talk about what I couldn't put in the review. Now yes, it was a paid review. I was sent a copy of the prototype, one of apparently only 10 handmade prototypes to be actually produced, and I was lucky enough to be sent one of those. No, I am not selling it, sorry folks. Even once I've got my full copy of the game, I will be keeping the prototype as a collector's piece, because I'm like that. And yes, it was a paid review, but that doesn't mean I wasn't allowed to say my true thoughts, and I do want to come straight out of the gate on this video. This is not a paid video, this is me talking about what I enjoyed or didn't enjoy about the game and things like that. I'm going to be completely honest and open here. I love this game. This has genuinely become one of my favourite board games of all time, and it would hold that position even if it didn't have any of the EVE Online branding. I really enjoy this game, so let's get that out of the way now for anyone who thinks that, oh, it was a paid review, you were just saying what they were paying to tell you. No, I enjoyed the game at FanFest, I played the prototype a lot and thoroughly enjoyed every single game we played, and honestly there must have been somewhere in the region of 14 to 15 games that I played in the preparation for that review. If you haven't seen the review already, do go and check that out. If you want to check it out on my brand new board gaming channel, that would be amazing as well. You can search YouTube for Boardgame Buccaneer. It's also linked at the very top of my YouTube page. Again, I will put it in the description down below, maybe a card on screen right now. This is going to be a podcast style video. Don't expect any flashy graphics, except maybe a few photos here and there. We will look at the Kickstarter page in a bit, so you'll get that on screen, but I'm not going to do much editing to this or anything flashy. It's going to be me talking about my opinions. I also wanted to go through all of the EVE: War for New Eden chat on my Discord, because a lot of folks there asked questions that perhaps some of those I didn't get to respond to during the video, just things that ultimately, I tried to cover as much as I could in that video, but it was already 40 minutes long, and there were some things that people wanted to know in a bit more detail than I could give there, because otherwise that video, 40-minute long review already, would have gone way into an hour. Anyway, so we're going to be going through the Discord, answering some of those questions, talking about the Kickstarter, because I do have some things to say there, and just giving a little bit of extended opinion about this board game. It's going to be fairly long, so I just want to get the usual messages out of the way quickly, then we'll jump right in. Now, if you do enjoy content like this, if you're enjoying the content on my channel, it really helps me out if you hit like and consider dropping a comment down below. Both of those things teach YouTube that people are enjoying my content, and thus they promote it to more people. Helps me out. I also just love chatting with you guys, and seeing you hit like on a video tells me what kind of content to keep making. And the more comments you leave, the more I respond. We get a little bit of back and forward. If I miss anything that you want to know about this game, you can ask it in the description down below, in the comment section down below, sorry, and I will try to respond to the fullest of my ability. If you want to keep content like this coming and you want to go the extra mile to help do so, I've got a Patreon page you can pledge to support at for as little as $1 a month, and a PayPal tip jar that you could drop the cost of a cup of coffee or whatever. Do I have my coffee handy? Yes, I do. I've got my G244 mug here with a nice fresh brewed cup of coffee. Yes, G244 mug that I'm that much of a nerd. When I'm making an EVE video, I drink out of my EVE mug. Anyway, all of that said and done, let's jump right in. So first of all, let's have a look at Discord and go through that EVE: War for New Eden chat. This was essentially where, before the video review, I asked people what they wanted to know about the game so that I could try and get as much into that review as possible and answer as many questions as I could during the allotted time. But we're going to go through these and see if I missed anything. So first question was, I'd love to know price, overall quality of the game pieces, and also if the game is fun and how it plays. Been following the game for a while and it looks fantastic. So price. For this, we're going to jump across to the Kickstarter page. The basic pledge for this, if we scroll all the way down, if you just want the core box, past all of these bits and pieces, because it's a Kickstarter, so, of course, we got a load of extra bits and bobs. The core game itself is €129 to back. Does say save up to €45, so you're looking there at €175 for the core box when it finally launches-ish. I know that's also included the unlocked stretch goals and the EVE Online starter pack in that saving. I imagine this will retail for about £140, £150. It is a big box. There's a lot of stuff in here. If you wanted to go all in, €219 gets you the core box, the Havoc expansion, and then the Titan expansions for both the core box and the Havoc expansion. Now, honestly, of that, the Havoc expansion excites me the most. It adds a 5th player, and it doesn't look like that 5th player is going to be just like players 1 through 4. Because it's the Havoc Pirates, they seem to appear in the center of the board just like they do in EVE Online itself in the Havoc expansion using shipcasters, where they're then going to be trying to corrupt systems. I think if you just want to get involved in the game, the core box is brilliant. That's what I've been playing. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Havoc is probably the first thing you want to go for. It adds the 5th player, exciting new ships, and a new sort of way of playing the game. The Titans, I think those are going to be a bit more niche. They make a big game bigger, which ultimately is going to be one of those things that you either know you want it or you possibly don't. I think for a lot of people, that's going to be a bit overkill. I don't think going in with expansions on day 1 is 100% necessary, but if you did want to go for an expansion, I would personally go for Havoc first, unless you know that your group is 1 to 4 players, at which point adding the Titans would be a good way of doing things as well. There's also the Capital Pledge, which doubles the size of everything, which quite frankly I think is bonkers. I can barely fit the standard game on the table I play on usually, so the Capital expansion doubling the size of the game is just madness to me, but some people are going to love that. And you've also got collector's boxes, where you get 1 of each of the ship casts at double size, specifically designed for essentially displaying it on a unit, painting them up, that kind of thing. Anyway, let's jump back. So we've covered the costs there. Overall quality, I can't necessarily answer because I got sent a prototype of this, right? So this was a handmade prototype, one of only 10, I think, actually ever produced, so I feel extraordinarily lucky at that. And no, sorry, I will not be selling it even once I've got a copy of the game. It is a collector's piece, and I'm so proud to have it. Sorry, I know a lot of you have been asking if I'd be willing to sell that onto you. It's not going to happen. Ultimately, the quality of the game pieces in the prototype was really, really good, and we know that from the Kickstarter they're actually increasing the card stock, they're increasing the quality of the box, they're possibly putting inlays for the ships and things like that, plus you're getting more plastic than you can shake a stick at. So the quality is actually going to increase on what I've got, and I was quite happy with the quality of what I had as well. So yeah, overall quality looks to be really good. If it's fun and how it plays, I've kind of shown in the video. If the game is fun, yes, absolutely. I will state again, this game is in my favorite board games of all time, and it would be so without the EVE Online branding. It's that good. Next questions. How many levels of gameplay are there? For example, we've seen the map, so this is location-based gameplay where you publicly perform some activities. Are there any fame or reputation ladders where you compete with other players? No, this is not a typical Euro-style game where you have all of those different tracks along the sides. You have your own research and development, which allows you to build your own unique engine, but you're not directly competing with other players. That said, there is one really cool development card in there called a Research Spy. It costs you 3 research points to build in the prototype. Obviously, that's subject to change. Spoiler alert, everything I talk about in this video is subject to change, right? There could be things that some of those cards change in costs between now and launch. Essentially, you develop that, and then when someone else reveals a research card, you can reveal your research spy and copy their research. Now, considering some of these research tokens are 8 or 9 cost, it means you can essentially get those for free, or for 3, I suppose, if someone else develops those first, or it just allows you to, on the fly, quickly develop something that actually you think would be really useful and you hadn't considered ahead of time. That's pretty cool. How much of the gameplay is happening publicly in a visible manner to other players? How much is covert and hidden? Basically, everything is public with the exception of your research and development cards, which are played face down so that people do not know what you are researching. That said, the rulebook, or at least the basic rulebook that I had, did suggest you could play with those face up in your first game just to help each other out and keep an eye on things. I still taught my players how to do it face down. We found it added a nice little layer of tension. Are players taking turns individually resolving effects, or similar to Game of Thrones, everyone casts their orders in an hidden manner? No, it's turn at a time. You do one action, then the next player does their action, and so on around the table you go, until you can't do actions anymore, then you pass. Once everyone has passed, then the round ends and you move to your next round via an upkeep phase where you get all of your materials, ISK income, developments, and that kind of thing goes on in that phase there. It's all very public, it's all very turn-based. What currencies are there in-game? Plex only, is there Plex or only ISK? Only ISK. Plex does not exist, but you do theoretically have the currencies of research points, of build points, and your different materials, like your 3 basic minerals, your advanced mineral, your components, your moon goo, and your planetary production resources as well. Is there a market? Can you win by going industry? There's a market. You don't sell to other players. You sell to the game to generate, basically you hand in your resources for ISK, and then you can use that ISK to buy other things using the trade action that's shown in the video. There's a little bit on the side of the board that tells you how much everything is worth when you sell it and how much you can then buy it for. It's essentially using ISK to buy things that you might be missing, or gaining ISK by selling stuff that you don't need anymore. Is there an implementation of exploration? If so, what does it do? Yes, you are going to start the game with an explorer frigate and a interceptor. You're going to be moving around the board and revealing tiles. The interceptor is perfectly adequate at doing that. It's fast, it can reveal the tiles quite comfortably, but the explorer frigates get the bonus that when a tile is revealed with exploration tokens, sorry, they're not called exploration tokens in the game, they've got another name I can't think off the top now. They're basically exploration tokens that you draw from a bag. When you have an explorer frigate reveal a tile, you draw an additional token and then choose which ones you want. So if you've got a tile that has two of these exploration tokens on it, two of these discovery tokens on it, and you've got the explorer frigate, you draw 3 and choose which 2 you want to keep, which is really beneficial. If you're lucky enough early on, that can make or break the early turns to give you a little bit of an advantage. Nothing that other players can't catch up on, but it can just be really nice to give you the choice of what you want to do, like being able to claim a system early that otherwise may have taken a complete action to do, additional resources that are going to allow you to build a little bit faster, research points to allow you to research that thing that you really wanted to get early. By the way, get the star map early in the prototype version. That is almost a required card to start with. It's essentially the research card that allows you to draw a new mission if you don't have one, or discard a mission and draw a new one if you do have them. It essentially gives you the opportunity to actually start earning more victory points. Mechanics, what do you do as a player? I've covered this all in the video, so I won't go a deep dive on there. Mechanics, combat. Is there a balance captured in the board game mechanics that bigger doesn't always mean better? Yes, absolutely. When you're doing the combat, all the ships in the small orbit roll white dice, which have low damage but high lock capabilities. The large orbit has black dice, which are very little lock capability, but a lot of firepower. And then in the medium orbit, you've got a nice mix of the two, and you can shoot across orbits. You can have your frigates shoot at battleships. You can have your battleships shoot at frigates. It's just going to be obviously harder to lock the frigates with battleships, and it's going to be harder to damage the battleships because they've got high reduction. If you're targeting, if you've got a group of frigates targeting a battleship with 3 reduction, for example, you need to actually score 4 actual, damage results before a single bit of that damages the ship itself, basically representing that you can't break its tank. Damage is carried over through the orbits and through the additional rounds of combat. You typically fight 3 rounds of combat. So if in the first round of combat your frigates do a single point of damage through that reduction, that will continue to the end of the entire combat, where, you might whittle it down over multiple rounds, or it might be that additional bit of damage you need for your other ships to actually take them out of action. At the end of the combat, everyone gets their health completely restored. It's assumed the logistics vessels come in and, pick things up at that point. So yes, there is absolutely that bigger doesn't always mean better, and you do really need to mix your fleet. Also, as a big pro tip, you are going to absolutely want to have some of those developments on your ships as well. The good old Tech 1, Tech 2, offensive, defensive, and utility systems. Those unlock some really powerful abilities. You can also put medium ships or large ships even into your small orbits. Obviously, they only supply the support die, but things like the Sleipnir and the Nighthawk, etc., the command battle cruisers can actually work really well going across multiple of the orbits to give everyone in that orbit a reroll, which can be really, really powerful. Who's the creator of the game? It's Titanforge. What's the minimum and maximum number players, and what's the sweet spot? So it's 2 to 4 in the base game. You can go up to 5 with the Havoc expansion, with one of them taking control of the pirates. That said, there is a sweet spot. I did think that 4-player games were absolutely the best. They were just enough chaos with enough conflict going on to keep things going well. The 2-player variant is a little bit more reserved in the opening. in that you find that everyone sort of spends a long time building up their empire and no one really wants to get into fights early. And in a 4-player game, you're kind of pushed into those fights really early on. In a 3-player game, due to the nature of the board, one of the players does start essentially penned in by the other two. It's not game-breaking. It just means that third player is going to need to really take that into account from the offset and plan for how they're going to break through the lines. Essentially, if you are basically like player 1, 2, and 3, if you imagine a square, you're on corner 1, 2, and 3. Corner 4 is empty, which means corner 1 and 3, those players can move towards corner 4, and they can move straight in front of them without coming into any form of conflict. They've got a big area to work with, whereas the person on corner 2 is stuck between corner 1 and 3 and has a much smaller area to work with, and that can be problematic if you've got a new player to the game who perhaps doesn't know what they're doing. Now, of course, this is based on the rules that I had in the prototype. It's entirely possible that Titanforge, and they did say to me, this is designed for 4 players. It's entirely possible Titanforge have found a way to make the 3-player game a bit more balanced. It's not to say it's unbalanced and unfun. You just have to take into consideration that you are going to be trapped in early on as that middle player. And if you develop accordingly, well, I've had games won by that middle player where they've just gone very aggressive and really tried to control the board state early on. In EO, important part of the game is waiting for your skills to grow. Is this any way reflected in the board game? Yes, that's your research abilities, where you have your development cards that you put down and you add research tokens to them. You don't have to put them on in order. You can put, one, if you get 3 research tokens, you can put 1 on each of 3 cards. You can put 3 on one card, you can put 2 on one and 1 on the other, that kind of thing. You can do it as you wish. So it's kind of like modifying your skill queue. You have to take the research action, though, if you want to replace the cards in there. And once a card is down, annoyingly, and this is something I do hope they do address, there is no way to get rid of that card other than completing it. So if you put something down and then go, oh, crap, I really didn't want that at this point in time, you're going to have to develop it and finish developing it before you can open that slot back up, or you're going to have to rush some of your other developments to open that slot back up again later. It is kind of awkward like that, and I do hope the research action allows you to actually remove cards that don't have any research tokens on them and replace them with others. That'd be a nice little house rule, I think, if they don't add that, but that is feedback that I did give the developers. Are there wormholes in the board game? Sort of. There is an event card called Wormhole. When you play that event card, you can move your a fleet off one of your tiles onto any other discovered tile. And in doing so, you roll a dice for each tile, and if you roll the crit, you destroy that ship. So basically, there's a 1 in 6 chance of each ship that moved getting destroyed by the wormhole, which represents spooky space quite nicely, I think. It allows you to do the whole kind of Thera shortcut, but there is a chance you'll lose a ship in the process. Wormholes as a strict thing that you can go into and actually rat and be involved in, no, that doesn't appear in the game. You are primarily playing as the 4 empires, and as you know, the 4 empires don't have any form of foothold in wormhole space as it stands. Is the board game tile pre-generated like in Catan, or do you explore new regions and reveal what new constellation has? So it's a bit of both. When you look at the board from above, there is a layout. Each tile has either a 1, 2, or 3 on the back, which is the speed that you need to be traveling at to get into it, the amount of movement points you have remaining in order to move onto that tile and reveal it. You always have to stop on an unexplored tile as well, by the way. And the 1s are fairly basic, low resources, low build positions, that kind of thing. The 3s, on the other hand, have a lot of resources on them, or the ability to pick and choose between multiple different asteroid belts, more construction slots, that kind of thing. They're higher quality systems, basically. And there is a setup layout, but of course you're shuffling those tiles and you do get different layouts. Also, the Kickstarter, one of the stretch goals is a few new tiles, which means you won't use all the tiles each game. So some of the tiles you'll see in different games, some you won't, and it does have a lot of versatility. Honestly, just the ones in the base game, after setup, you're left with 1, 2, and 1, 3, or 1, 1, and 1, 3. There's only like 2 tiles that don't get used during setup. So there's not that much randomness in that. Like, you're pretty much going to see the same tiles over and over again, but their position can be completely different each game. And they're so similar with enough nuance that I never found myself wishing there were more tiles, if I'm being completely honest. I thought that there is enough versatility and variety in the core box as it stands there. So that, in my opinion, is a good thing. How balanced the faction are. Is it always blue that wins? No, absolutely not. The factions, basically, the ships all have the exact same stat lines, but with slight differences in their utility subsystems or their defensive and offensive systems. So, for example, the Curse has the ability, you can unlock the ability on it to shut down enemy systems on their cards. So you can look at someone saying, flying a Sleipnir and go, no, you don't get to use that reroll ability, because my Curse shuts it off, whereas the Rook, I think, makes it harder to lock onto other people in that same orbit, that kind of thing. It represents there's subtle differences between the factions, but the ships are very, very similar. It's well balanced. You're using the exact same development deck between each player. Obviously, they're different colors for each of the players, but the cards actually in them are exactly the same. It's very well balanced. Out of the 14, 15 games we've done, there was not one faction that took the lead more than others, or less than others, I think. Related to question 5, are there different ways to win the game? Are these reflecting in-game PvE, PvP, trading, hauling based on indie playstyles? Yeah, completely. Loads of different ways to win the game. Going into combat, you can score victory points by winning a fight if you're the attacker. If you win as the defender, you don't score victory points. But both of you will draw event cards based on how many ships you've lost, and the defender always draws a defense card, an event card, if they lost at least one ship. So you can get victory points through combat, you can get victory points through your missions, which can be anything from, destroy a player to the ship, a ship to the player of the left or right, to have a certain amount of resources or a certain amount of ISK, or even just have someone attack you and then play this card and you get a point. Some of your development cards will give you victory points as well. There is one of those that I alluded to in the video where at the end of the turn you get 1 victory point if you have at least one large ship on the board. So there's all kinds of different ways there. And victory points can literally be manufactured if you have one of all of the 3 basic minerals and 2 of the, is it Morphite, the red one? Whichever one it is, the rare one, the red one. Basically, one of each of the 3 basic and 2 of the red ones. You can hand those in as part of a manufacture action to gain a victory point. You can literally build your way to victory, and we did have a guy who, in one of our games, sort of the end game had been triggered, and he just kind of went manufacture, made 3 victory points that way, revealed a couple of mission cards that were all to do with resources and things. I don't think he'd been in a single fight the entire game. And he won the game on 17 victory points by essentially manufacturing his way to victory. So yes, absolutely, it's possible to do different ways like that. And trading is mainly done through the mission cards. If you want to get victory points out of that, there is one called Market Breaker that if you have 30 or more ISK, or 10 or more ISK, I can't remember. When you've got a certain amount of ISK, you can reveal the mission card and you gain a victory point and an additional victory point for every 10 ISK above that goal that you have. I think it's if you've got 10 ISK, you can complete the mission. And up to 3 victory points if you have 30 ISK available, which is, you don't spend that, it's just have the ISK. So yes, absolutely, trading can get you a load of victory points as well. Is there different security level? Is it all played out in nullsec? If they're sec level, how does Gate Guns and Concord work? Gate Guns and Concord simply do not exist. This is all out full-blown war. Is it in nullsec? I guess it kind of is. I always assumed it was just low-sec fighting between the 4 empires, but yeah, I guess it could be nullsec as well. It works quite nicely on that. Can you have multiple from one ship type? Yes, absolutely. You can have like 3 or 4 of, say, maledictions in a fleet if you wanted to. There are some that are not necessarily worth having multiples of in a fleet. For example, things like the Saber or the Heretic, the destroyers, basically, they don't add any support to the combat, so it kind of makes sense to only have one of those in a fleet. So it does go up front and center in the small orbit, giving a lot of dice as the leader of that fight. Because they don't add support, it's kind of pointless having more than one, because then the other ones are going to be in support of everything else and not really doing anything additional or interesting. This is an interesting aside. It means that the Galente player, obviously you've got catalysts, or technically heiresses, because of how the cards work. They're all named after the Tech 2 variants, but you have to unlock the Tech 1 or Tech 2 upgrades. So kind of they're catalysts, I guess you could say. It means you can't really do a catalyst gank fleet because there's just no point in it. If you had 4 catalysts, you're going to be rolling the same dice as if you only had one of them, basically, because there's only one leader and the others form support and they don't add support dice. Point to note. If there's trade in the game, is it only on one tile? No, it's independently of your position in the universe. How much freedom, flexibility do you have to fine-tune the gameplay with your own custom rules? That's not a question I can really answer. Essentially, that is going to be completely up to you. If you want to add a load of house rules to this and your group's happy with that, go for it. I think the game's fine without them. I can't think of any house rules other than, as I said, the possibility of when you do the research action, rather than just refilling empty research spaces, you can also swap cards out that don't have any research tokens on them. How quick is it to learn? How long is the average game? The average game we played was 3 hours. There was usually a new player in there, so we were having to teach. How quick is it to learn? Surprisingly quick. Now, most of our group are, of course, seasoned board gamers. I'm not sure I'd bring this out in front of my mum and stepdad, but there we go. Because of the nature of the game, pretty much everyone's first action is going to be to do a move. So you're all going to see how movement mechanics work. Then you're going to do things like maybe a trade if you get some resources, or maybe a manufacture if you get some resources. You're probably going to want to do a second move if you've had your 2 ships at the start separate from each other. You might do a claim. There's basically only really 4 actions that you're going to do in your first turn. And you've got 3 action cubes, so there's not all that much decision-making you have to make early on. The game naturally eases you into its mechanics. By about the 3rd or 4th turn, you may have a fight going on. You'll probably have enough resources to do like a manufacture action on your 2nd turn, so you're not blocked from doing any action in any turn, but it does kind of unlock those sort of passively as you go along. Like, you're not going to manufacture on turn 1, really, unless you chose to start with Tritanium and you want to spend all of your starting ISK buying 1 more small ship, which can be useful. I mean, there's definitely advantages to doing that in your first turn. But for the most part, you're going to have 3, maybe 4 actions on your first turn, using your 3 or 4 action cubes. You're using your 3 action cubes. Your second turn, you might try some of the other ones. So you're sort of introduced to the mechanics slowly. None of them are locked away from you, but you're not going to be able to do everything all at once. The one thing I will say that was another minor negative that hopefully gets fixed in the final version of the game, and even then it's not really a negative. At the start of the game during setup, you're asked to choose 4 development cards to add to your research row. Now, your development deck is 40 cards. If you're a brand new player coming into this game, you're essentially told, read all 40 of these cards and pick the 4 that you want to start with. That's a lot of information to a new player early on. I would like to see in the rulebook there is like either a standardized setup, not necessarily you have to do this, but just kind of here's 8 cards that you want to choose 4 from at the start of the game that are going to give you a good start. Pick any 4 out of these 8 and that's how you go. I've been playing a game recently called Beast. And Beast itself does have a first game setup. It suggests, rather than randomizing these bits and that bits, play with these 3 hunters and this beast with these cards in hand. You skip the whole drafting phase in the first turn. Just play it this way for your first turn because it makes things really simple and you'll understand how the mechanics work. Something like that. You don't have to do it. If you've got seasoned board gamers who are quite happy to jump in, they can. But if you've got a couple of new players, it's kind of a way of streamlining that setup. Did I play with people who've never played EVE games before? Are they in a huge disadvantage? Did they enjoy the game? Yes, everyone I played with genuinely said they enjoyed the game. We had a couple of sessions where we'd finished playing the game the first time, and then they were literally like, well, we've got the rest of the day, we've booked the table out here, let's go again. And I've never done that with a 4X game before in my life. Never once have I finished a 4X and then immediately gone, let's play another one. So yes, they enjoyed the game. Of my gaming group, I'm trying to count off the top of my head now, 8 or 9 of us that played this game in different group formations. Of the 8 or 9 of us that played this game, only one other player, shout out to you, Luke, if you're watching this, was an EVE Online player. And I think he won a couple of games, lost, as many as each of us. I don't think anyone really won or lost more or less whether or not they were an EVE player. No, it doesn't give you a huge advantage. All of the information you need is on the cards. If this was not an EVE Online game, it would still work, and it would still be fantastic. Do I feel the potential for future expansions? Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we've seen the Havoc and the Titan expansions added in the Kickstarter already. I would love to see Tech 3 ships get added, Tech 3 destroyers, Tech 3 cruisers, along with the ability to harvest those resources. I imagine you could add an expansion that, in that expansion, you could also have gas in there as another type of very rare resource. that could be added in, so like a Tech 3 expansion. I think you could even just do ship expansions. A box that has assault frigates in it, and it just gives, 5 assault frigates for each, the miniatures, for each of the 4 empires, alongside the one card for those. So like the Wolf or the Jaguar. For Minmatar, Kaldari getting like the Hawk or whatever, just literally that. You could add in additional ships at the different tiers. Attack battle cruisers are notably not present in this game, and having a medium ship that exclusively rolls black dice as the leader could be an interesting way of doing things. I think there are expansions that could add new ships to this. I'm not convinced we'll get it because this is an IP-related game. There's a part of me that thinks this Kickstarter will probably be it, but I am hoping we get more expansions later. That would be dope. That would genuinely be dope. I'd love to see ore ships represented. Obviously, you have things like your Mining Fleet Action card, which is a research development that you can use to harvest additional resources. That's how mining ships work in the game. You don't actually have mining ship models because they're represented by the fact that you've got a station-in system with an asteroid belt, and you claim the resources that way. It's kind of one of those concepts that's going on in the background without needing an actual model to represent it. That said, having something like an Orca, a Porpoise, or even a Rorqual that is a ship that you put in a system to get bigger bonuses from those that can be destroyed by invading players, yeah, that could work. That could really work. There's a lot of expansion for adding different ships to this. The only thing I can't conceptually think of personally, and if you can, let me know in the comment section down below, is hauling ships. I would love to have a model of a Prowler or a Mastodon, for example, for the Minmatar. I just can't see how that would actually work in the game because there's no need to move resources around the board. And one of the things I didn't actually mention in there, though, that's just reminded me, didn't mention in the review, is there's also the ability to raid other players. If you have enough ships in another player's starting area at the end of the turn, you can literally steal victory points from them, which is a really cool mechanic that is representative of the ESS banks in EVE Online. How much politics is built in already? Formal alliances is the built-in conflict between the factions. For example, Gallente versus Kaldari, Amar versus Minmatar. There's not built-in conflict other than the fact that every player is going to want to police the board, claim as many systems as possible, and that is naturally going to cause you to brush heads against each other, alongside missions that say, shoot that player. Definitely there is conflict. Is it specifically Gallente versus Kaldari, Amar versus Minmatar? No. No, not at all. And I'm actually kind of glad of that because otherwise, in a 3-player game, you're not going to have all of the factions. In a 2-player game, you're not going to have all of the factions. And if I want to do Kaldari versus Minmatar, I want to be able to do that without feeling like I'm missing part of the game, Also, I don't want to have to play a game where, as a Minmatar player, the Amar player is going super defensive and rolling around the board, and I'm getting all the kill the Amar stuff. And just the only fights I can get are with Gallente or Kaldari. I think it works better this way. How much politics is built in already? Table talk is a thing. Table talk is absolutely a thing. Communicating with each other and kind of trash talking. Trash talking in local. It's a thing in the board game as well. Saying to people like, yeah, look, the Gallente player's getting a bit crazy over there. Maybe we should all, gang up on him this turn. Absolutely, do it. So formal alliances, no. Informal alliances, hell yes. It's not really alliance-based. You are playing as the 4 empires, not player alliances. What's game setup time? Gameplay time at 2, 3, and 4. So 2, 3, and 4 players, the play time is very, very similar. For an experienced group, 2 to 3 hours is not unreasonable. 3 to 4 hours for a new player group, probably about right. Game setup time, I can personally get this set up in about 10 minutes. I've had to do that numerous times when recording the video, take everything out of the box, set it up on the table and make it all look pretty. I can personally do it in about 10-15 minutes. Tear down, again, you're looking about 10 minutes. It's not a quick setup and tear down, but it's not a horrific one either. Can it be played solo? No. Is the board game available in India? I believe so. Let's jump back to the Kickstarter and scroll all the way to the bottom to the shipping, because you do need to take this into account here. Rest of the world, yeah, I assume it is. So if you're going for the pledges, just be aware of what the shipping cost for those areas is going to be. I mean, heck, it can get Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan, Philippines, Indonesia. I see no reason. The only ones they do not ship to: Russia, Belarus, Central and South America, Afghanistan, Congo, Ivory Coast, DRC, Eritrea, Guinea-Bissau, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Liberia, Myanmar, North Korea, Somalia, Sudan, and Syria. Basically, they don't ship to war zones, which kind of makes sense. But equally, they are shipping to Ukraine. Make of that what you will. But India, yep, absolutely, India, it's available. Is it fun? Yes. Does it feel like EVE where different ships have bonuses and malices? Yes. Is it well balanced so no single faction or playstyle dominates? Yes. How long does the game last? We've answered that. Would a non-EVE player get it and enjoy it? Yes, very much so. Main goal? Earn victory points. The end game is triggered when one player earns 10 victory points. If that happens during the upkeep phase, you just play a final turn as normal. If someone gets their 10th victory point during a turn, however, some really weird stuff happens. It triggers an emergency upkeep. That is called the Verge of Ascendancy. Basically, if a player earns his 10th victory point mid-round, he immediately finishes that action, and then everyone goes into an emergency upkeep where you don't earn victory points or get anything like that, and then you start a new turn from scratch there, which can be a little bit unusual. We've had a couple of games where a turn starts, and it's like player A, the first player for that turn, immediately gets that 10th victory point and just resets the game for another round. So it feels almost like they get an additional action, but that's one of the advantages and or disadvantages of triggering the game early. It never really balanced anything. I don't think there were more games where the person who triggered the end game won than didn't. So it seemed to work out. Could I give you a playthrough with a friend or two so we can understand the whole game dynamic and everything? I would love to do an actual play of this. It's going to be a long video. I mean, you're looking at, what, 3 hours of playthrough. I would need to find a way to mic up all of my friends and get that set up, but I'd love to do it. If you've done this kind of setup before, let me know. I think that could be an interesting thing for me to do on the channel. So when would this game be available to everyone? Information on Kickstarter. Capital Pledge does not contain the expansions. Correct. The downside, in inverted commas, of the Capital Pledge is that your other ships, if you go for Havoc or Titan, they are going to be smaller than the actual core box. Are there any other questions here? I love this. Is it just me or do people in the wallpaper of the board game actually look like people from real life ethnicities? Yeah, of course they do. It's EVE Online. They are based on real world ethnicities in very unique ways. Don't think that's it. I think that's all of it. So that's all of the questions that we had asked, which means let's talk about the Kickstarter itself, because I'll be completely honest, I did a video for this, obviously. I'm glad that Titanforge sent me a copy of the game through. I've thoroughly enjoyed playing it. I do genuinely recommend it. You should have got that by now. I'm not normally a fan of Kickstarter board games. Like, if you ask our gaming group, I do not like Kickstarted board games. Things like Tainted Grail. It's like, oh, it's beautiful plastic, but the game itself's absolute crap underneath it all. And I think a lot of Kickstarters just throw the number of pieces and the big plastic miniatures and look at how many cards, look at the value you get, and the game's absolute shite. Like, you know, thousands of miniatures, tokens, and cards doesn't necessarily make for a good game. Aetherfields. Lord, Aetherfields is a bad game, but looks beautiful, and it comes with tons of components, right? I think Kickstarter can lure you into this idea that, oh, it's fear of missing out. I'm going to grab everything right now because, oh, I don't want to miss out on it in a future date. I think there's a lot of games that our group has got. Nemesis, Tainted Grail, ISS Vanguard, a lot of these really big board game Kickstarters. One of my friends has everything for Nemesis, everything for Tainted Grail, everything for ISS Vanguard, and it's just, he paid a load of money, and we've not really played it all. Like, for Nemesis, honestly, the core game, maybe the lockdown version, is kind of all you need. We find that a lot of the new aliens they added in Nemesis, all these expansions and things, we just don't really use, because the core game experience is great, and we actually don't want to change that up. The fungus enemies, and I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, and I'm going off on a tangent here, but like the fungal enemies in Nemesis, I really hated that. I love Nemesis as a board game, but the fungus enemies just felt so dull and bitty, and oh, we got these dice that we have to rotate, and we've got this new thing to, you know, take care of, and there was nothing thematic about it. It was just fiddly, and I hated it. It actually took a game that I love and made it not fun. So Kickstarters like to essentially throw big shiny things at you in the hope that they can pad the box with as much plastic as possible and, you know, force you to go out and buy it because of FOMO. This, I don't think it necessarily is. I'm not personally sold on the Titan expansion, simply because when we've played the game, you know, it's literally in the same turn as people starting to build battleships that someone triggers the Verge of Ascendancy in the end game anyway. Now, yeah, you could probably extend the game by people policing a little bit more. Absolutely. But Titans are going to really need to expand the actual end game conditions of the game and make it so that that comes later. Also, you know me, I'm just not a fan of the huge ships in EVE Online. I'm much more of a cruiser and frigate pilot, personally. Doesn't mean I won't enjoy this. I will give it a try. I've got this coming. So I may as well give it a go. But I kind of expect the Titan expansion to be the one that gets less use. Having a 5th player from the Havoc expansion, yeah, that's going to get a lot of use. I've got definitely 5 players who are going to enjoy this. But the Titans, I'm just not absolutely sold on the concept of them yet. That might change. When I get my hands on this and see how it all works, that very well might change. We'll see. We will have to see. But then things get a little bit, like, weirder with the Kickstarter. Like, yes, I've gone for the dice tray and the extra dice, because in case I lose a dice, I'd like to have extra ones available, and dice trays, well, I love dice trays in general. Having an EVE branded one, it's not necessary, but it's nice. The collector's boxes, I can see why people would like these. Even if you don't want the full board game, just getting some miniatures to build and paint is pretty sweet. You don't need to necessarily play the game and, you know, have a group of friends, but you can just buy all of these ships and then paint them and sit them on a shelf and have them look amazing. That's cool. I really like that they did this. But then the stretch goals. Oh god, I have thoughts about the stretch goals. And I'm sorry, I love the guys at Titanforge. They've been amazing during this process, and I'm not going to say this is bad. It's not. It's not my tastes. First of all, these component models. In the core box, the components, the moon and planetary, these are tokens. And then the minerals are cards, and control flags are tokens as well. If we scroll up to the core box, see if we can find these here. Let's have a look on that main picture. Yeah, here we are. You can see them there. So you've got like your moon goo here, you've got your planetary, and you've got your, that's your components there. And your minerals come as cards as well, like this here. Now these slot into a nice tray. They're easy to stack, easy to clear, and you can just hand them out. You can stack them in your own play area as well, so you can easily see how much Tritanium you've got, how much Mexilon you've got, that kind of thing, and you can just work it out and hand it forward and backward. It's really, really easy, especially since there are some things in the game that allow you to steal random resources. So you hold the cards up because they've all got the same back, you shuffle them, and someone picks a random resource from you. That's really easy to do, right? Yeah, with the mineral tokens, that's impossible to do. You can't randomly do this without having to involve, like, dice or things to choose which ones you randomly get. So you're suddenly going to have to draw the cards and do it. It's just needless faff and more plastic that I really think actually makes the game less enjoyable and harder to play. I know some people swear by these kind of tokens. They'd prefer these to tokens. But especially for the minerals, I really think the cards do a much better job than bloody plastic crystals. Like Titanforge, again, thanks for doing this. It's free if we reach 500,000 euros backed, but I just don't want them. I will get these, obviously, if we unlock them. It's part of the backing, but I don't want them. I won't use them. They're going to sit in a box somewhere and just never get used. Same here, because the tokens do the job just fine. It's the same with the control flag models. In the game, when you claim a system, it's a little cardboard token that goes onto the system and announces that that is your system. When in the later game you've got big fleets of ships moving around, those little tokens are fine because they sit on the corner of the hex and they don't get in the way. These are suddenly 3D models. That's going to suddenly interfere with the ships. You're going to be knocking them over. You're going to be accidentally picking them up with the fleets. I don't think this is necessary. I actually won't use these either. I would rather stick with the cardboard tokens. 3 new system tiles, 1 new level 1, 2, and 3 tile. Nice. I'm not going to complain about this being added to the game. It adds a little bit of extra versatility, but even with the core game, you know, yeah, you recognize a tile when it gets flipped over. You're like, oh, it's that one. But its position is completely random each time, so you don't feel like it's a problem. You don't feel like it's a bad thing at all, and it's fine. These are just not overly exciting to me. Same with the new event cards. What I do like these, though, is that they're based on real EVE Online experiences. I know Cartier Say has put in one here that I really like the concept for. I won't spoil it in case it does get added. But having these designed by the community is cool. But 5 new event cards doesn't mix the game up all that much. Nice to have, though. I'm not going to complain. Box linen finish? Yeah, cool. Higher quality box. Thicker card stock, definitely. This is cool. Like, the cards in the game are good quality anyway in the prototype, but going up to 350 GSM, hell yes. I am happy with that. Nice, thick cards that aren't going to be damaged. I know a lot of people are going to sleeve these, but there are so many cards in the game, and sleeving, you get the sharp corners on sleeves, especially like the mission and event cards that are those smaller style cards, if you could see in the video. I know those sleeves can get a bit fiddly. When you've got stacks of sleeved cards, you're doubling or tripling the size of the deck. It doesn't fit in the box anymore. Glare is an issue. I don't actually sleeve most of my board games. I don't think it's necessary. Like, you don't play them enough for this to actually be a big damage thing. And if you're really worried about, like, people spilling all over your cards, sleeves don't necessarily stop that. I've had sleeved games ruined by a drink hitting the table and actually going down the sleeves. And equally, you just don't have drinks at the table, or you just have them in, like, travel coffee mugs and things like that. This dedicated inlay, though, gosh, I hope we get here. 450,000 euros. What are we at the moment? 302 with 23 days to go. So I really hope we make that one, because at the moment, all of my ships are kind of just loose in the box, which is fine. But once they're painted, they're kind of bumping around each other. I would love these dedicated inlays, a way to actually pop the ships back in and keep them all safe and secure. It's going to make the box a bit bigger, but I'm fine with that if it protects the models. To me, that is probably the best thing in this entire stretch goal. So if we make it this far, I'll be happy. I really don't care about the mineral models. I won't use them. The control flags I won't use. The moon and planetary and the component models, I will just not use these. These are not going to get used because the tokens do actually, in my opinion, a better job. But some people are going to love these. I'm not going to say it's terrible. Some people are going to love these. I just personally don't. I prefer the tokens. I think they're fine. But that inlay, I want it. I want it. And anyway, I think that about covers everything that I wanted to mention. Stuff that wasn't put in the video, stuff that I didn't get a chance to talk about. If there's a question that I haven't answered about the game and you want to know more, let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions about the game. To answer that question one more time, because again, I know a lot of people are going to be along the lines of, oh, Benzie, you know, you're just saying you love it because A, it's EVE Online, and B, you were paid to do the review. No. I really love this game, even if it weren't EVE Online, and now I'm outside of the review context, I can honestly say I love it. It's really, really good. Is it perfect? No. No game is, and I think accepting a game having certain flaws is what makes the game interesting, you know? Yeah, there are some things I'm hoping will change, like the ability to redo your research cards, that kind of thing, but for the most part, this is a really darn solid game experience. I'm excited to see what Havoc adds to it. Not so excited about the Titan expansion, but we'll see. I might, eat my own words and absolutely love having the Azariel and the Ragnarok and all of that on the table. The pink Keep Star as well? Fine, I guess. It's a nice bit of, EVE history, I guess. But at the same token, it's just a model. It's just a model. Anyway, folks, that's all. If you do like board games, make sure you are subscribed to my board game channel. I'm putting this up on that channel as well, so maybe some of you will see it from that. That is youtube.com/@BoardGameBuccaneer. Come join me on there for a lot more board gaming content, a lot of different games I want to talk about with you all. Obviously, if you're watching this on that and you want to learn more about EVE Online, come find me at Captain Benzie, and that's my EVE Online YouTube channel as well. Anyway, folks, any questions, ask down below. Otherwise, thank you for listening to me ramble on about something I am genuinely passionate about. Can't wait for you guys to get your hands on this as well and start playing it. I want to hear all the stories of how you get on with this. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!